everybody to the second series of my class on GST. Let me begin with a question. When you look at this slide, what is the first phrase that comes to your mind? Exactly, one nation, one tax. Now, what does the term one nation mean in the context of GST or the taxation? Does it mean that every tax in India has disappeared? Does it mean that the center and the states now have only one common tax authority? Obviously not. Not exactly. India continues to have different taxes, different tax authorities, and different levels of government. Then why did GST come to be popularly known as one nation, one tax? Because GST attempted something much larger than merely replacing a few taxes. It really attempted to bring together a fragmented or a divided indirect tax system into one common national framework. The India represented here is not merely a geographical India. It represents different states, different markets, different businesses, and different economic activities. So prior to introduction of GST, many of these activities were governed by different indirect taxes and different compliance systems. So the real question before us is this: did GST actually create a one single tax, or did it create something more sophisticated, a common tax architecture for the nation? You will be surprised. In fact, during the next few minutes, I would like us to explore these questions together. We will begin by looking at the fragmented indirect tax structure that existed before introduction of GST. Then we will see how the constitution was amended to create a legal foundation for introduction of GST. We will also understand the difference between interstate and intra-state supplies, then CGST, then what is SGST and what is IGST. And finally, and not the least, we will ask the most important question: what does one nation, one tax mean in the eyes of law? Because we will discover GST may not literally be one nation, one tax, but it certainly represents one of the most significant attempts to create one nation, one common GST architecture, and the one integrated national market. So let us begin with a question. What was the indirect tax system in India before GST? Before we begin to understand what is GST, let me ask a basic question to you. Was India having only one indirect tax before 2017? The answer is clearly No. At the central level, what were some of the important taxes? Central excise, service tax, countervailing duty or special additional duty. And what about the states? What taxes were imposed by the states? VAT, CST, entry tax, entertainment tax, and several others. So, if a business was supplying goods or services across India, was it dealing with a one tax law, one authority, or one complicated compliance system? The answer is exactly no. What were the consequences? Multiple taxes, tax cascading, multiple compliances, different state tax systems, barriers to interstate trade. So the problem was not merely the number of taxes, the larger problem was the fragmentation, the division, the segregation. Therefore, the question became, can India move from this fragmented system to one common indirect tax framework? But there was a constitutional difficulty. That means everything has to conform to Indian constitution. The center and the state had a separate taxation powers. Then how could a common GST system legally be created? That was the biggest question. So I would like to ask you one question. Can the parliament, by simply passing a law, take away the taxation powers of the states? You must be saying no. That is correct. Because the constitution divides legislative and the taxation powers between the union and the states. Therefore, GST required something more fundamental, that is a constitutional amendment. An amendment to the constitution was the need of the time. That is why we have the 101st amendment happened in 2016. First, Article 246A was introduced. What this provision do? It gave both parliament and the state legislatures power to make laws with respect to GST. So the constitution created a shared legislative space for GST. Now, what happens when the supplier is in Kerala and the recipient is in Tamil Nadu? That is an example of interstate supply. Article 269A deals with the levy and the collection of GST on such interstate supplies. And who brings the center and states together to discuss GST? That is the GST Council. So these three provisions give us the constitutional architecture for GST. So the center, together with the states, one common constitutional framework comes into play. Now we understood the constitutional foundation. But how does this system actually work in practice? Now, here I want to make one clarification. When we say one nation, one tax, does it mean that there is literally only one tax called the GST? Her answer is no. That is wrong. Let us consider one example. Let us consider about a supply happening from Kerala and a consumption happens in Kerala. What kind of a supply is this? That is intra-state supply. And what happens to the GST? It is divided into two. That is CGST and SGST. So if the GST rate is 18 percentage, we may have 9% CGST and we have a 9% Kerala GST. Suppose the supplier is in Kerala, the recipient is in Tamil Nadu. What happens now? This is the example of interstate supply. Here we have IGST. So is GST one tax in literal sense? No. We have CGST, we have SGST, we have IGST, and we have UTGST. Then why do we call it one nation, one tax? The answer is simple, because these taxes operate within one integrated GST framework with a common taxable event, that is supply. And there is an integrated input tax credit mechanism. So that is the real meaning of the expression one nation, one tax. So let us now identify the actual pillars behind the expression one nation, one tax. So if the expression one nation, one tax doesn't literally mean one tax, what does it actually mean? One taxable event. What is a taxable event in GST? That is supply of goods and services or both. So GST moved away from separate taxable events such as manufacturing, sale, provisions of service, and adopted one common concept called supply. Secondly, what is one of the biggest advantage of GST? It created a mechanism whereby input tax credit is given throughout the supply chain that reduce the cascading. The idea was to allow credit to flow through the supply chain and reduce the cascading effect, that is tax on tax setback. Then one national market. What was the one major economic objective of GST? The idea was that tax should not become an artificial barrier to movement of goods and the services across states. So there is a one national market. So where should tax ultimately accrue? The place where goods are produced or supplied, or place where it is consumed. That is the idea called destination-based taxation. So the destination state or the place where the goods or services are consumed is actually the state or place where the GST component goes. And finally, GST is administered by the center alone? No. The center and the state participate together. That is why GST is often described as an example of a cooperative federalism. The word is cooperative federalism. So we put these five ideas together, we begin to understand the real meaning of the term one nation, one tax. But there is still one important legal question. Is GST one single tax? No. Then what is GST in reality? It is one common framework. There's one common taxable event that is called the supply. It provides an integrated IGC mechanism. It creates an integrated national market, and it is based on a common constitutional architecture. But what is GST not? It is not a single tax. It is not one single tax. It is not one single rate. It is not one single statute. It is not administered by a single tax authority. And the GST doesn't apply to every economic transaction. Therefore, if we want to be literally precise, the term one nation, one tax is a popular expression, not a literal description of the GST legislation. The more accurate expression would be one nation, one common GST architecture, in my opinion. So, can we summarize the entire journey in one single flow? Where did we begin? With the fragmented taxes. What was required to bring the central and states into one GST system? That is the 101st Constitutional Amendment, which introduced Article 246A, 269A, and the 279A in the Constitution. Then what was the result? The result was a common GST framework consisting of CGST, SGST, IGST, supported by an integrated credit mechanism. And what was the larger economic objective of introduction of GST? It was an integrated national market based on destination-based taxation. So if I had to explain one nation, one tax in one sentence, I would say this. Listen, GST did not create one single tax in the literal sense. It created one common national GST architecture, one integrated credit chain, and one common market. That, in my view, is the real meaning of one nation, one tax. Thank you. Hope you understood the term one nation, one tax. If you like it, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you. We will meet again with another interesting topic in GST basis. Until then, bye bye.